And then so as we were doing all of this, I'm starting to notice it is so much easier to do business here in America than it is over there in Senegal. And at first I thought it was, oh, maybe just because we're so poor, but everything is so messed up, and is here very rich, so everything is following through normally. And I started this foundation. I wanted it to do exactly what I was able to do. And then I started to meet interesting people, very interesting people. People who introduced me to concepts that I intuitively see. For the longest time, I was to the left of the left. If I told you that I was even dating some commies, you would think that I'm laughing today, but I was not. I was very much in my little bubble, feeling so superior. When I got together with my today husband, Michael, a friend of mine called me, she's like, you can date Blue Shirt. And I said, why? And she had Googled him, something I never do when I have to date somebody, because I don't want to find out about this person from anybody else's eyes. I want to use my own eyes. I want to use my own. No, I don't want anybody to muddy up the waters. So anyway, but she's like, Blue Shirt. And it turns out that she said Blue Shirt because that day Michael was on Bloomberg talking good about Walmart, talking about how Walmart really was giving greater purchasing power to the poor, how Walmart really was creating to the poor and lesser fortunate among us, how Walmart actually was really a good stepping point for so many people who otherwise, where are they going to find a job? I mean, the ratio of application to acceptance for Walmart workers was actually, the ratio was way lower than than Harvard, meaning that it was harder to find a job at Walmart than it was to get into Harvard. So that tells you there's a demand. Again, I go back to the market, right? The market is telling us something very powerful. So who are you to say that all of this is wrong? Who are you to say that they're not doing something good? Right? Mm-hmm. And so because of that, she totally nixed it. She was just like, no way. So I met, so of course, Michael and I connected. And the reason why we started dating is because actually when I started this foundation and I wanted to, for my foundation, I didn't want it to give fish to people. I didn't want it to give grants like, oh, we're going to give you clean water. I think all of that is great. Actually, so many people are doing that and that's fine. I just don't think it's the end of all. So when I started on that journey, everybody wanted me to just write checks. And I'm like, I don't want to write checks. I want to understand what helped me do what I did. And I want to replicate that. Mm-hmm. And it's at that time that I connected with this world of people who were talking about something called the free markets. That's when I connected with, that's when I first understood. And then as I started talking to those folks, I started to understand that in a way, I was intuitively something. They were using this word and they were saying this word called libertarian. And for anybody French listening or my fellow Senegalese friends that might listen to this at some point, I'm gonna say what I always preface with, libertarian, not a libertine. See, that tells you everything you need to know, because in the French language, you say libertarian, they think right away that, because libertarian is not, So anyway, I learned that there was a term for the way I intuitively felt, right? And I learned, and so I started to, wow, all of a sudden I'm like, then it was just all starting to make sense. I was just like, yes. If you make it that it's going to be so hard for me to start and run a business, of course, many people are not going to want to run a business. And if you don't have enough people running, starting a business, it means the jobs that are, that would be created by this don't exist. And if the jobs don't exist, then the income that people could be getting from that is not there. And if people don't have access to an income, then they are, yes, poor. It was just this simple equation, but it was starting to build in my mind. You're poor because you have no money, at least not enough money to care for your most basic needs. You don't have money because you have no source of income. What is a source of income for most of us? It is a job, isn't it? Where do jobs come from? The private sector. And even those who say it comes from the government, well, I would like to think that even if you work for government, you're going to be paid a salary, right? Where does that money come from? And then people are like,
stolen from the private sector.
It's like, exactly. But we take from the employers and the employees, and then we make the machine turn. Wow. I had it upside down the whole time. Of course, it made sense. It made so much sense. And I lived it in my bones. I lived it in my journey.
So I love hearing about this revelation at the end of such a long tale, because I can relate to it deeply, and it's something that's been in my intuition for a long time, right? The importance of freedom, free markets, libertarianism. But we're not equipped, as you said, as we said offline, the education system does not equip you to articulate that properly, right? You have this vague, dim apprehension about what works, but we don't receive adequate tooling to explain it until you discover, right? Like you, by happen chance, discovered libertarian philosophy, or advocates for free markets, Austrian economics, all of these things, none of which are taught in any mainstream curriculum whatsoever. And that can't not be by design. How could it not be? Why would it not be part of curriculum? At least part. Like the fact that mainstream curriculum is totally silent on it,
yeah,
is very telling, right? It speaks volumes. We could say.
It is.
And it
But
is that simple, right? Leave people alone and they will self-organize and be productive and
yeah,
trade with one another. And that's the source of wealth.
it totally is. But then we wonder why when you say it's by design, of course I'm tempted to think it's by design. Was it always exactly by design? Maybe not. And where I'm going to go with that is this, because once I discovered this, and I discovered that my experience was not just an anecdote, that this is very well documented. The Doing Business Index ranking of the World Bank, which measures how hard or easy it is to start a business anywhere in the world, systematically shows us that most African nations, sub-Saharan African nations, except maybe for 5 of them, are at the bottom of the list. The Fraser Institute one, same thing, Economic Freedom Index, same thing, shows the same thing from Heritage, same thing. So all of these indexes, economic indexes, one after one, are basically showcasing exactly what I have gone through. I can put examples behind the numbers that they came up with to show this fact. And so at the end of the day, countries like mine are poor. The reason why Africa is the poorest region in the world, despite having some of the greatest riches in the world, chief of them, it's young population. In my country, 75% of the population is below the age of 25 years old.
Wow.
And it's almost like that all over sub-Saharan Africa. So, but the reason why this continent and sub-Saharan Africa is poorest region on earth is because it happens to also be the most over-regulated region in the world. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
We are poor because we lack economic freedom. This is the freedom that no one thought about. And then people say, how did you get there? And I tell them, I take you all the way back to the mid 1940s. Especially there is this one event that happened in Manchester, UK in 1945. We call it, it's the 5th Pan-African Congress. At that meeting, this was their last meeting before the independences in Africa that started taking place in the late 50s and onto the 60s. Ghana going first in 1957. My country was much later in April 1960. But what you had there were all these liberators of the African nations. So remember, we're in 1945. You have to put yourself back into the grander scheme of things. What is happening in 1945 in the world at that point? What were we in? What was going on? Well, what is going on is you had, Gandhi, who was making some really good inroads with, emancipating India from Great Britain. It would happen officially later, a couple of years later in 1947. But what you had happening back then is like there was this wave of hope for freedom. If Gandhi was making such inroads, being the largest colonized country in the world, And yet it looks like they were going to win for the emancipation from the largest colonizer in the world, Great Britain back then. You can only imagine like the other colonies all around and how they were starting to be like, wow, this is possible, we can do this. So imagine yourself, put yourself in the shoes of, when they went to that meeting, you had Blaise Diagne, he was the one from my country. You had Jomo Kenyatta from Kenya. You had Julius Nyerere from Tanzania. You had, Bandia from Malawi. All of those people were there. These were the fighters for the African liberation, right? But the sad thing is, they all have been co-opted by Marxist socialist values. So those are the ideologies that they had hang on to. And how we got to that is because, again, we're in 1945. Back then, what you had, the free market ideology was almost all but dead. It was a tiny group of people. No, I think it's Rothbard who at some point said, or somebody like that said, at some point you could fit all of us libertarian or free marketeer people into a phone booth, a phone booth. We came from so far away.
There was a point in Mises' journey. I can't recall if it was World War I or World War II. Mises, man, I'm not sure I'm not sure which war it was, but he was on the front lines of the war, and he was basically the only libertarian guy left in the world. So it got that close, right? Like, had we lost him, you may not have had Human Action. You would not have had Rothbard.
Absolutely.
You may have not even had Bitcoin, right? Had that happen. So